Hello, this is Bradley Thayer for CIS 156 at South Mountain Community College. We're talking about PythonLists. Now, you may or may not have watched the video or read the chapter on tuples, but the largest difference, perhaps not the only, but the most notable difference between a list and a tuple is the immutability, which we'll get into in a minute. So some of the concepts here are very similar to what you might see in the tuple section. However, we're going to make, instead of the parentheses for tuples, we're going to use these square brackets, opening and closing, and that will create a class list. Like the tuple, our list is heterogeneous. We can put values of different types, 2 strings, an integer, a float. And like I mentioned at the opening, our list here can be mutable. So I just made up a temperature outside, 59.4, and I'm going to change it to 60.1. When I run this, you can see that yes, the list did allow me to change that to 60.1. I can loop over the values in my list. So I'm going to create right here a list of cities. This is a partial list, obviously. There's many more cities. But if I come right here and decide that I want to print everything that's in my cities in Arizona list, I create a variable here for city, and every time it loops over cities in Arizona, for that one duration of the loop, it's going to place that value into city, and then once it passes to the next one, that will become city, that will become city, and so on. So that when I print this, every time I print city, you can see it prints one value from my list. I can do what at least I consider to be some cool things with the list. I can get the length. Okay, so you can sit here and count that, but it might get a little out of hand when your length gets to be hundreds, right? So I can say, okay, my list length equals len, and in parentheses, my list there. And it gives me back a type of integer. When I print that integer out, I get 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So remember that this is index 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the index runs from 0 up until the length minus 1. But when I ask for length, it just counts like normal counting numbers. I can do a membership, and what that means is I can ask, is a certain city in Arizona? Is New York City in cities in Arizona? And when I print that, it'll tell me false. Let me comment this, get it out of the way, a little bit of clutter. It's going to print false. If I were to change this to say Glendale, and it becomes true. I can do certain operations. So let's say I want to add Cottonwood in. So I say cities in Arizona equals cities in Arizona, and I'm going to add, and I'm going to use the same structure as a list. I'm going to say Cottonwood. And sure enough, when I add this, now Cottonwood is in my list. I could put a second name here and say, there's another name of a city. So Prescott. Sure enough, they're both in. I'm going to take that off so my other examples work. I can do what's called a slice to a list. So what it did is I said my list, and then it would say it went to the index 1, 0, 1, and then what did it print? It printed to Peoria. Okay, so it went to the third index. It didn't go to index 3. It went to the third place. Okay. If I would have said 4, it went to Tempe. If I would have said 100,000, it would have just printed everything down to Cottonwood. I've added Cottonwood there. So you can go over here. If you do something like that, right, it kind of plays with it and does funky things. Try to keep these positive numbers here. Deletions. Let's say I accidentally add in a city that does not exist in Arizona, and now I have Atlanta. I can come back and delete that, and it takes Atlanta out. If we get away from our cities for just a moment, and we have this employee string, I can split that employee string and create two lists, or two values in a single list. Employee name and ID. So I've split it on that dash. I can nest a list, and if you're doing a math problem as such, you can create your own matrix by having these nested lists. And lastly, for this video at least, I can do what's called enumerating. And by enumerating, I can get the, I think number being a sort of a similar root here. I can get the index number, and I can do something with it. In this case, I just printed them, but it enumerates which index I'm on when I'm looping through the list. This is not an exhaustive list of things you can do with lists, but this helps you get the idea of some of the things that operations we can perform on lists and some of the cool things we can do. Thank you.